We're diving into Ezekiel. But before we do that, I just have to say, I'm super excited. Some of you know, a little bit of a nerd. And Disney announced Star Wars, the 50th anniversary is coming up. The original movie came out in 1977. I went to it. I was 2 years old at the time. My mom says I cried, and I said, of course I did. They couldn't get a babysitter, so they took me to the movie theater with them, and I cried. And do you know why I cried? Because I wept at the beauty of what I was experiencing. Okay, my mom said it was because she thought it was because it was like really loud and I got scared. I was like, no. I wept at the beauty. It's probably why I'm into sci-fi to this day, right? But in the years since then, when Star Wars originally came out, the original Star Wars, George Lucas didn't know he was going to make sequels. He didn't know there was going to be this whole empire. He didn't know that decades later he was going to sell it all for $4 billion to Disney. All he knew was like, I have this idea for a movie. And so the first movie was just called Star Wars. Okay? And then when it was a huge hit and they made Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, he went back and changed that opening crawl where it's like the yellow and the music and it's going up the screen. Originally, that just said Star Wars and then the story. And then he changed it to say Episode 4, A New Hope. That got added years later when Empire Strikes came back. And then when I was in college, he spent a ton of money and remastered it and changed the special effects and added some scenes and took out some stuff. And he felt bad. Like he was like, there's no Han Solo in the original Star Wars shot Greedo. Anybody ever heard the debate over who shot first? Han shot first. Because in the original movie, he just straight up killed Greedo. Greedo didn't pull a blaster. He didn't reach for his blaster or anything. Han just shot him. And then George Lucas was like, there's no coming back from that in the 90s. He was like, you can't redeem a person that just straight up murders. So the whole movie is about Darth Vader getting redeemed. And Darth Vader did so much worse. But whatever, George, like it's your movie. And so he changed it to make it like Greedo tried to shoot. And he shot first, and he missed, and Han shot him, and it's like, whatever, okay? And then he, like, changed the special, he added a whole bunch of stuff, and George Lucas was like, I'm never again releasing the original Star Wars. And that, I don't like that. I feel like we should be able to see that. And Disney finally announced, in honor of the 50th anniversary, next year, they're going to release the original Star Wars, no Episode 4, no Greedo shooting, just Han straight up murdering him, just the original special effects. The way it was intended to be is going to be in theaters next year, and I'm so excited. And here's why I was thinking about all this. I think some of you are like, oh, how does this connect to Ezekiel? It does. There's a moment in that first Star Wars, right, where it all begins for Luke Skywalker. I'm assuming most, if you've never seen Star Wars, next year is the year. Luke Skywalker is the hero. But when it starts off, he's kind of a whiny dude. He's like, but I want to, you know, and he had like, he's away from his home. He's being raised by his aunt and uncle because he's an orphan. He has dreams of being something greater, like he wants to go off and fight in the Clone Wars, but he can't. He's stuck on his uncle's moisture farm, just in a desert, farming for moisture, right? He wanted to go out with his friends that day, but instead he's stuck cleaning a couple of droids that his uncle just bought from some Jawas, and something happens, right? A hologram appears. He accidentally does something to R2-D2. A hologram appears. A message plays. This woman asks for help, and Luke's hero journey begins, right? It's impossible odds, almost certainly doomed to failure. How's this 17-year-old moisture farming dude going to go save the universe? But he sets out anyway. Best movie ever, all right? Like, check it out. Here's the deal. Here's why I say all that, because we're about to spend 3 weeks in the book of Ezekiel, which is a book, it's 48 chapters, records the life and ministry of the prophet Ezekiel. But here's the deal. The Babylonians, this is a time in the Israelites' history when the Babylonians have conquered them. And they've taken a bunch of them captive back to Babylon. So they've destroyed the country. They've taken captives, and including this 25-year-old dude named Ezekiel who is training to become a priest. He wasn't a priest yet. And the book opens 5 years later in the year that Ezekiel was turning 30, the year he would have become a priest. And instead, his hopes have been crushed. He had had these dreams of doing something important, but instead he's away from his home. He's trapped in a life he hadn't wanted when something happens, right? His hero's journey begins. It's impossible odds, almost certainly doomed to failure, but he sets out anyways, right? That's that part of me. It's like, oh my word, it's Luke Skywalker all over again. It seems impossible, and yet here he goes. And so he opens his book. This is in his voice. Ezekiel 1:1. He says, on July 31st of my 30th year, while I was with the Judean exiles beside the Kebar River in Babylon, the heavens were opened, and I saw the visions of God. And these visions were a trip. Right? We don't have time to dive into it today, but if you want to go back and read Ezekiel chapter 1, if I'm super honest, I wouldn't say this in big church, but we can trust each other. Some of you might be like, was Ezekiel high? Right? Because this stuff was just wild. He spends a couple dozen verses trying to describe what God shows him. He sees these wild angelic creatures with multiple faces, like on each side of their head, and different animals represented in their bodies, full of power. And then there's these wheels within wheels that are covered in eyeballs. And it's carrying a platform with a throne, and this incredible being on the throne. It's God, right? No spoiler. And I can't do it justice. This can't do it justice, what's going on. It's a wild image. Ezekiel gets really weird with some of his visions. And so Ezekiel is trying to describe all this, and he closes the chapter with these words. He says, this is what the glory of the Lord looked like to me. When I saw it, I fell face down on the ground, and I heard someone's voice speaking to me. Ezekiel 1 is his best attempt at describing what God showed him. And so there's a part of me that goes like, is some of what he's describing, was it literally appearing that way? Or is he using these different animals to communicate? It was like the power of an eagle, but then also of an ox, and then a bear, and this, and that. Like, is he just grasping at whatever he can to go, this is what I experienced in this vision? Whatever it was he saw, it was incredible. It was overwhelming. It was why he ended up on the ground. And in all of that, God showed up, which is huge because Ezekiel is like in a different land. They're conquered. There's a big chance that a lot of them are feeling like God's forgotten about us. God shows up. And he had a message for Ezekiel, and that's what we want to jump into here. In verse 1, God says to him, stand up, Son of Man, said the voice. I want to speak with you. The Spirit came into me as he spoke. This is Ezekiel talking here. And he set me on my feet. He's going like, God's Spirit picked me up and put me on my feet because he was overwhelmed. He shut down. He goes, I listened carefully to his words. And it gets kind of interesting to me because over the 48 chapters, God calls Ezekiel Son of Man 93 times. That phrase is only used like 14 times in the entire rest of the Old Testament. God never calls Ezekiel by his name. Just every time he's like, Son of Man, Son of Man, Son of Man. And why is he doing that? Because usually the Israelites, the Judaites, they were called sons of Israel. So God's doing something intentional here. And part of it is that he's contrasting, hey, you are immortal. It's contrasting, hey, Son of Man, your mortality, you're mortal. God is deity and eternal. There's some of that going on, but there's also something else interesting going on, a little Hebrew lesson for the day. The phrase that he's using, son of man, is Ben Adam. All right, the Ben is the son of, and then Adam, man. And some of you are going like, Adam, man? Yeah. Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 and so on, whatever. Adam, the first man, his name literally means humanity. His name literally means humanity. And so there's something a little symbolic going on with Adam in Genesis 1's name to go, he is the representative for humanity. That's why his sin affected all of us. That's why centuries later, the New Testament says of Jesus that Jesus was the second Adam. In the same way that Adam's sin affected all of us, Jesus' salvation can save all of us. And so God is saying to Ezekiel, son of humanity, son of Adam, right? That in the way that Adam represented humanity, you have an opportunity to represent me to your people. You're representative of your people. It's a really fascinating thing, right? That God is giving him his spirit, literally raising him up off the ground because he has something big planned for Ezekiel. God continues. He says, son of man, again, like so many times. He said, I am sending you to the nation of Israel, a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been rebelling against me to this very day. They are stubborn and hard-hearted people. This is why God let them be conquered by the Babylonians, because his whole deal with them was always, if you remember in some of the other books we've looked at, hey, if you follow me, if you honor me, if you love me, I'm going to bless you. If you do not, I'm going to judge you and I'm going to punish you. And he was like, I'll let other people conquer you. I will let them mess you up. And so these Israelites, sure enough, they had started worshiping other gods. And they were breaking the laws and they were mistreating each other. They got so bad and God warned them, and they didn't listen. And then finally it's like, all right, I'm letting the Babylonians conquer you. And even after they got caught, it's 5 years later, they're still not repenting. They're still worshiping the other God. They're still doing all the stuff. Nothing's changed. And so God is going to send Ezekiel. And so he says, hey, but I am sending you to say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. And whether they listen or refuse to listen, or remember, they're rebels, at least they will know they have a prophet among them. I love that God's command to Ezekiel wasn't, hey, you need to make them listen. Right? God's command to Ezekiel was, I need you to go tell them. Whether or not they listen, that's on them. Your only job is to go talk to them. He continues in verse 6, Son of man, do not fear them or their words. Don't be afraid, even though their threats surround you like nettles and briars and singing squirrels. He's like, this is going to be rough. This is going to be dangerous. Do not be dismayed by their dark scowls, even though they're rebels. You must give them my messages, whether they listen or not. But they won't listen, for they are completely rebellious. I love that God's like, hey, whether they listen, spoiler alert, they're not going to listen. It's like, they suck. They're the worst. Like, they're just, it's not going to go well. But I'm giving them this chance. So then he wraps up. This is the whole chapter 2 is 10 verses. He says, Son of man, listen to what I say to you. Do not join them in their rebellion. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. And then I looked and I saw a hand reaching out to me. It held a scroll which he unrolled, and I saw that both sides were covered with funeral songs, words of sorrow, pronouncements of doom. And you go, is he supposed to eat a scroll? In chapter 3, he eats that scroll. And you go, he ate a scroll? Here's the deal. This is a vision. So in the vision state, that's what's going on. What God is telling him to do in this vision is he's going, you need to internalize this message. Everything I'm telling you needs to become part of you. You need to know this message inside and out. Let it be in you so that you can communicate it accurately. So you know what to say. Right? That it was this message was calling out the Israelites for their failure to follow God. They had rejected God even in judgment. Even after being conquered by the Babylonians, they were still rejecting God. And God is going, your message is to bring them the opportunity to turn back. And that's the first thing that really stands out to me. There's two things that jump out at me when I look at this passage and go, what do we learn from this weird vision moment that happened 2,600 years ago to a 30-year-old dude wondering what had happened to his life, right? And the first thing that just stands out to me is that God shows up. It's on the back of your paper. I didn't even make it a fill-in. I'm just having it there so you can remember later. God shows up. And sometimes he makes an entrance, right? Like he made an entrance for Ezekiel. These visions were intense. And there's going to be more visions in the book. The imagery was incredible. That's the rare way that God shows up. Far more often, God shows up quietly. Right? It doesn't matter if his people are in Babylon. It doesn't matter that they failed him. They let him down yet again. But God still shows up. And I think that happens to us sometimes, right? Like a metaphorical, you might feel like you're in Babylon. That you have blown it yet again. That you've failed in some way to honor God or live up to what you wanted to be. It doesn't matter where you are. God shows up. God always shows up. We're his children, and he will always pursue us. I love in the Psalms, it says this in Psalm 23:6, surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. I love that this psalmist is going, God is going to pursue us every day of our lives. There is nothing you can do to stop God from showing up. There is not some line that you can cross where God is like, well, I'm not showing up for that. People might be that way, but God will never get there, right? That God isn't contained by this building or by the borders of a country or by a house, right? That it didn't matter that Ezekiel and his fellow exiles were far from home in another country. It doesn't matter where they were, God pursued them. It doesn't matter where you are. God will pursue you. It doesn't matter what you've done, how you follow God or failed to follow God. He shows up where you are and calls you to respond. And some of you have heard me talk about before that in my early 20s, I came back to God, right? I came back to God. When I was your age, when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, I got hurt a lot and really disillusioned by the adults in my life that called themselves Christians, that were abusive and were really hypocritical, like they were saying all this stuff about how super spiritual, but then they didn't act it. And it was very disillusioning for me. And I was like, I vividly remember having a moment when I was like 17, I was going, well, I don't want to be a part of that. Like if that's what God is, I'm not going to be that. And it wasn't until my early 20s, somewhere around 21, 22, that I finally had this moment where I was surrounded by some Christians that really lived out the Christian life well. That they had grace and love, and there was a generosity of spirit there, that I finally went, well, I could be that type of Christian. But here's the part of the story that I was thinking about now, right? And this idea of God showing up is I finally had this moment of going like, I'm coming back to God. I want to follow God again. I want to turn my life back to him. But before I do that, I need to get my life in order, right? Because there was some stuff going on in my life that I was really ashamed of. There were some things I was really struggling with. There was some bad patterns. Like I was cheating in some of my classes. I really was struggling with lust in my mind and my thoughts. And I was turning to things to deal with stress and anxiety that were not healthy and appropriate. Right? Like I was starting to play around with alcohol a little bit too much. And like all these things were going on. And I was just like, oh, like this is too embarrassing to talk to God while all of this is going on in my life. And so I spent like 3 or 4 months trying to willpower myself to be clean enough for God. Right? Like I was like, once I stop doing this, once I stop thinking this, then I can pray, and then I can start being a Christian, then I can start, and I kept like going like, and I had so much shame, and I was so many ways I was beating myself up. And then one day We were in, because I was going to a Christian college, they had a chapel, and they were doing this skit, and it was tackling exactly this issue. And so they're doing this little drama. And I was sitting there, and for the first time it hit me that I was being ridiculous. The whole reason I needed God was because I cannot deal with my sin on my own. Right? Like, I cannot willpower myself to have a good thought life. I cannot willpower myself to stop saying things I shouldn't say, or making jokes, or doing things I shouldn't do. That I needed to go to God, and He would have the strength and power to help transform me into the person that He wants me to be and I want to be. And what was incredible is I finally realized, like, this whole time that I was trying to do this, God was showing up. God was always there, ready for me, and I was refusing to let Him in until I got myself good enough. And finally, I broke down and I prayed and I repented. I went clean slate on everything. And God showed up and transformed my heart and my mind. And the incredible thing is, right, like, none of the stuff went away. I still had to deal with temptation. I still had to deal with pressures. I still had stress and anxiety that I hadn't been responding to well. Like, all of that was still there, but I finally had the ways to have some peace in the midst of it, to still have joy, even though I was dealing with all of these other things. It didn't get easier, but I was transformed because God showed up. And things didn't get easier for Ezekiel either. We're gonna see more about that in the next 2 weeks. In the midst of the challenge, God shows up and gives peace, but it doesn't mean that our life becomes easy. I love this promise from Jesus in Matthew 11:28 and 29. Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens. I will give you rest. Take my yoke." That was a fancy way 2,000 years of saying, take my beliefs on you. "Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart. You will find rest for your souls." See, when God shows up, when we let God in, God gives us rest for our souls. That's a heart level rest, even in the midst of challenges, of difficulty, of pain, which I just go, man, doesn't that sound amazing? Like, I read that verse, I just go, it's a sigh of relief. Which brings me to the other thing that jumps out at me from these passages. That God shows up and that we just need to simply obey. Right? That multiple times God tells Ezekiel all he has to do is obey. It didn't matter the result. It didn't matter if the people listened. It didn't matter if the people changed. It didn't matter if the people did what Ezekiel said. All that mattered was if Ezekiel did what God told him to do. And what they did or didn't do was between them and God. Here's just one of the many times God says it to Ezekiel: you must give them my messages, whether they listen or not. They won't listen, for they are completely rebellious. And I think there's so many times that we think success or failure in life as a Christian is measured by the results. What do we accomplish? And God is going, no. The success is whether or not you obey. It didn't matter if even one person did not listen to Ezekiel. God was still going to consider him successful if he obeyed, because he gave the message. Over and over, God is telling Ezekiel essentially, hey, you have one mission. Tell them this message. By the way, they're definitely not going to listen to you, but you do your mission. Right? And I find that so encouraging. Because whether or not I am a successful follower of Jesus is not measured by how many people I see choose to follow Jesus. It's not measured by how viral my social media posts about Jesus is. It's not measured by how many people are willing to listen to me. My success as a Christian is not measured by how many service projects I do, or how many things I build, or how many mission trips I go on. God doesn't care about any of those metrics that we tend to look at and go like, oh, that person is really spiritual because they did all of this, right? God doesn't care about any of that. Those are things that we put on ourselves. God just wants us to simply obey. And so I think the question becomes for us, like, what is God telling you to do? Is it to know him more? Is it to speak up at school? Is it to love your brother or sister more? Is it to be more respectful to your parents or your teachers? Is it to be kind to someone who needs kindness? And the incredible thing is, your success is not defined by whether or not the person you speak up for at school changes or acknowledges it, or maybe you love your brother or sister more, but they still act annoying. That doesn't mean you were successful or failed by what they do. If you are respectful to your parents, but you still struggle, like, you did your part. If you're kind to someone and they don't acknowledge it, what matters is whether or not you have obeyed. God sees it. God honors it. God looks at you and sees success regardless of what's going on around you. Where do you need to simply obey regardless of the result? Ezekiel was 30 years old. He was trapped in Babylon with his dreams crushed. He had every reason to give up, every reason to assume God had forgotten him, and then God showed up. God essentially said, I see you. Get up. I have something for you to do. And I feel like that's the story for so many of us today. Maybe you're in a Babylon, or you've been in a Babylon, a season that wasn't what you planned, a situation you didn't choose, a feeling that God is distant or that you've blown it too badly for him to use you. And the message of Ezekiel is this: God is showing up anyways. He always has, he always will, and when he does, the only job you have is to simply obey, right? Not to fix everything, not to make everyone listen, not to go viral. Just obey the next thing that God puts in front of you. And today I want you to ask this question. It's on your paper for you to even, like, in your quiet time, to write down some answers. What's the one thing, God, what's the one thing you're asking me to do right now? Don't ask him for the whole plan. Don't ask him for all of the stuff. Just what's the next step? Write it down and then follow through. Bring in some accountability. Talk to some other people. Pray about it. Ask for the courage to follow through and just do it, whether people notice or not. Because that's what faithfulness looks like. That's what Ezekiel did. That's what God is asking each of us. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your word. We thank you for the book of Ezekiel. And as wild as some of the imagery in it is, the message is so relevant to us today. God, we thank you that you always show up. God, we thank you that you're always there, no matter what. And God, I ask that you would help each one of us, help me, to just simply obey the next thing that you have in front of me to do. The next thing, the next step to be more like you. God, we ask that you would give us the courage, the strength, the encouragement, the wisdom to see what that thing is and to follow through, to simply obey you. In your name, amen.